Welcome to the moment that changed everything, where we interview notable creative people to gain insights into how they got started and learn more about the moments that shaped them and their careers. Today, we sit down with Steph Mackie, co-owner of the agency Mackie Biernacki in Toronto. Steph has held positions at a number of creative shops, including Lowe Roche, TBWA Chiat, Burnett, and other notables before hanging a shingle herself.
I think that we're taught as creative people that you can get as far as being like the CCO, but you still have a president and a CEO on top of you. You examine yourself. There's no reason why you can't run a company as a creative person. You can't put on the president hat as well. And I think that people should never put themselves in just a single lane.
In this episode, Steph talks about her start following in her father's footsteps, how cultural differences impact creative development. She was once reprimanded for disgracing a tea bag while working in England, and how we view opportunities as risk when going it alone in business, but rarely talk of the risk of not pursuing our dreams. Anyway, Steph Mackie.
Yes. Oh God, here it goes.
Here we go. This is the beginning of the podcast.
Okay.
Steph Mackie.
Steve Gardner.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about you for the whole time. How do you feel about that?
Super uncomfortable.
Okay, well, we'll get past that soon. So I was going to say, Craig Brownrigg was on recently. I don't know if you know Craig.
Yep.
I got to work with him very briefly before I made my way to New York. And it was so great to catch up with someone that I worked with long ago. Right. And then, of course, I checked your LinkedIn profile and I saw how long ago that we briefly worked together. And it was like 1993 or something like that.
It's unmentionable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, I don't want to make us feel old or anything, but you, of course, have gone on. You have your own company now, which is amazing. And did you ever think that would happen back in 1993?
No way. I didn't even think it would happen 8 years ago. So, but in 93, you just want to get your book, and you want to. My biggest goal was to get to London to work there, and that was as far as I saw forward.
And then why London? Why were you thinking about that?
I think it was a challenge. I think we grew up with like, oh my God, I drew Fromage just there. I thought there's nothing better than the market in London, and it was a challenge. And I thought if I am actually half decent, I should kind of see. And I love to travel, so I thought, well, I should do it before I get too old, and it becomes difficult. And off I went.
I think when people hear British accents, even, we still have this thing where it's like, wow, they sound very erudite and so much smarter than me and all that kind of stuff. And back then, I think in terms of advertising, I think everybody we knew that their media ran differently. They would have blocks of commercials at the very end, but the thinking back then was it had to be entertaining for people to sit through, and that must have meant that the work was so much better. But then you went there, and then what was reality?
The reality was they're just way, way bigger than us. And so I think they have far more kicks at the can of greatness than we do. So I basically went there, and getting a job was really easy, which was great. I was a bit panicked about that, but I think there was a bit of novelty in that I was Canadian. And I worked at 3 different shops over there, all completely different. And at the end of the day, there was great work and there was a lot of really shit work. And I think that was one of the most wonderful things I picked up. I also learned that I really didn't like working there. They have a different system, and I don't know if it's changed now, but when I was there, you had a creative director, you had a head of art, you had a designer, you had a typographer. So as an art director, basically, or as a creative team, you just sat there and you came up with ideas and you handed your stuff over to someone else to do all the fun stuff. And if you didn't, like, not only did you have to get along with your creative director, but you had to have the same sensibility as your head of art, which I did not. And so, if you didn't like the same style of advertising, then you were kind of butting heads with multiple people all the time. So I left kind of the bigger shop. I was at Ammirati to start, and then ended up at a very small, like a 40-person youth agency, which was awesome. And it was that was completely different because it was the first time I had worked on what they called through the lines. So instead of being an above the line snob where I would never have done anything like tactical before, I was like, oh, we're actually like running Glastonbury and designing clothes for Starburst. And then I'm doing an ad for Disney. So that was kind of a big eye opener on the positive side of things. And I was the head of art. So I only had to listen to myself at that point, which was good.
So when people go to other markets and there's maybe a cultural difference, is that something that you felt when you were there? Because, we had Ron McDonald on. He's worked almost everywhere, 10 different continents.
Yeah.
I asked him the same question. What was it like in England? Was it?
I think, we've worked in Hong Kong and done work for Dubai, and those had kind of far bigger cultural differences. I think in Britain, I kind of was right on the line where a whole bunch of the stuff went. The humor is far more aligned to ours than when we're working in LA. But I wrote a spot that completely ticked off everybody because it was apparently insulting a tea bag, and you don't insult a tea bag in England. I mean, it's sacred.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's my mind, but that even those words alone are enough to be kind of like somewhat offensive in certain circumstances.
Yeah. You can have people like slapping each other's asses, but you can't insult a Peachy Tips tea bag.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you got to make mistakes, and
Yeah. Like, I'm so sorry, and they're like, oh, now I'm Canadian because I'm apologizing.
So let's talk about where you started, because I know that you went to OCAD. So did you know when you were younger that this is something that you wanted to do? Did you want to be in design? What sparked that interest?
Yeah, I had a bit of a heads up because my dad was in the business, both as a client and on the agency side, but as a suit. And so I kind of got hooked as a little kid, and I would tag along to the agency, and I would, torture his poor art directors because I would ruin their like fancy Pantone markers. And I remember being in edit suites and being vocal about my opinion, which I think is like so cringeworthy now. I'm like, I should apologize to all these guys, but it was, I think it kind of stuck there. And I remember them having these really cool assignments. So at one point when he was a client, De Beers Diamonds was a client of theirs. And they came to the agency and said, okay, we make all these solitaires now because solitaire engagement rings are this thing, but we have now all these tiny, tiny, tiny little diamonds. We don't know what to do with them here. And the agency basically were like, okay, what do we do? And they came up with this idea that, okay, with all these little diamonds, we're going to put them in a ring, in a circle, all the way around, and we're going to sell it as an anniversary band for 10-year anniversaries. And I was like, you guys thought of the 10-year anniversary band? Like, what? That's what agencies were doing. And I thought, that's amazing. So, my friends all had Duran Duran posters in their bedroom, and I stole cool-looking ads off of subways and ripped them out of people's magazines and put those on my walls, and that was the end of it.
I mean, I don't know if that was still you would consider that a throwback or whatever. I mean, I think everybody watches episodes of Mad Men and you see the amount of influence the agency is having with clients, and the idea that a client would say, well, here's my business and we have this issue, can you just solve it for us?
Yeah. Seems
like not rooted in any kind of reality that I'd experienced. Did you feel the difference if you were at a young age and you saw that going on, and then when you got into more of an intermediate sort of level or whatever?
Did I feel the rug pulled out from underneath me? Yeah, for sure.
Just write the ad. Okay, we'll tell you if it's any good.
Just give me a headline and find a stock shot.
Yeah,
definitely. You felt the pendulum swing from what I saw going on in the past to being treated almost like vendors. I used to always say, we're not monkeys in cages that need to be, trotted out and then put back in our cages when they got the ad that they wanted. And I'm finding now that those are the clients and the pieces of business that I don't want to deal with at all. It's great to write an ad. I love writing an ad, but you want to write an ad because the client has said to you, I have this problem or I have this opportunity. What should we do? And that to me is just way more interesting and motivating. So, yeah.
I mean, we're going to circle around to different topics in this conversation. And of course, we're going to get into your agency now with Mark. But I was going to say, what made you decide not to just continue on in larger agencies and move up the management chain? And is this what you're talking about a little bit? Is this one of the factors that came into that decision? Or
yeah, I think I think we felt like we had done that, and we had an amazing experience being the creative leads. I don't even know what the title is anymore because the titles keep changing.
Right.
You used to be creative director and you were the boss, and then you're ACD and then CCO and whatever. Supreme leader. So we had that amazing experience where we were running an agency with a fabulous president. And then when she left and Jeff left, it was just us. So I think we felt, okay, we have the best possible people around us because the agency was amazing. We have this great legacy. We have kind of all of that power, but we're still really not able to call our own shots. And I think at some point when we started looking around, every offer that came to us came with something or someone that we just weren't interested in going for. And that was based on a history of, experiences together and things happening that we thought, yeah, check, we don't want to be involved in something like that anymore. Or we don't want that situation to happen anymore. So it kind of ended up just happening where we're like, you know what, let's just freelance and wait for the perfect opportunity. And then 3 weeks into freelance, we're like, what are we doing? We have all of these opinions. Like, we're super opinionated about how things should go. So why don't we just try it? And we kind of very naively just went for it with this kind of these basic thoughts of how we still had heart for a lot of the business and we really disliked a lot of the business. So how do we cut all of those things off that we had been taught that this is the way things had to go? And how do we just go blah, 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 blah. Let's just try this, looking at things very differently. And one of the things were, we don't want to just be, vendors anymore for our clients. And, we had a list of those kind of important things that we thought, well, let's just do it. And then we got really busy. And then a year later, a couple people, 2 different companies tried to either merge with us or buy us. And that was the first time we kind of looked up and went, oh my God, it's been a year. And it was the first time we kind of examined what we were doing and actually really committed to it and thought, well, maybe we should stick with what we're doing. We didn't feel done yet.
I'm kind of fascinated by long-standing partnerships in this business because, for people who don't know, writers and art directors are paired together, and many of them can have success together, but then they go off and they do their own things. Of course, kind of a timely thing that's going on now is this Peter and Carlos kind of thing, right? Which everybody probably looks at and kind of goes, well, there's a little bit of sadness because those guys have done such great work. But these long-standing relationships, did you and Mark have a conversation at some point that was like, yeah, we're gonna be together forever? It is sort of like a marriage in a way, right?
Yeah.
Did you guys consciously do that, or was that something that just organically you just felt and you just went with it?
Have you met Mark?
I've met Mark a few times, but I've never talked to him for more than like 5 minutes.
Yeah. That's what you get. You get a lot of long pauses. You're like, how you doing today? I'm good. So, he's not really effusive with his feelings, but I think we did have one of those situations forced onto us. Actually, we've had a few situations forced onto us where we had to just actually have a conversation about whether we were moving forward or not. The first time was when Emirati was decimated by a stupid call by New York. And, the agency imploded in like 3 days.
Yeah.
And he was off. He had 6 broken ribs at the time. And I phoned him and I was like, Doug's out. The agency is gone. And like, what do you want to do? I like working with you. And it was probably the first time that we actually had to overtly say, do you want to keep doing this? And then I think it's just, you get as these situations arrive, it was just, or come up, we briefly have the conversation. Are we doing this? Or are we not doing this? And
it's just amazing to think about because it's such a big decision. Mm-hmm. I mean, it can ruin a relationship. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you do have a personal relationship with someone and getting into business and owning your own place, you're putting that relationship in jeopardy and you're going to be tested like crazy.
Yeah.
And, I have a friend of mine who owns his own business and he's like, there's only two things you never want to be a part of, is something like, one is a sinking ship and the other one is a partnership.
Right.
Something like that, because, it's been the ruin of many of a relationship. So, I mean, to just kind of have a brief conversation about it, it's such a huge deal. Well,
but I think, we've been partners for, I don't even know how many years now, like longer than I've been married. Right. And I have 2 kids, so that's been a long time. So I think it doesn't just happen overnight. We didn't just meet and say, okay, let's do this, because I do think that there's a lot of risk in that, because you don't know, even the first year of working with somebody, you don't know if it's the relationship or not. I mean, I had 7 partners before Mark. Right. So, and I think we just had a lot of kind of taste tests of starting our own company. So we worked together at Ammirati and loved it. Ammirati imploded. Then we went to Doug with Doug and started that with him. And, that was a brand new experience where, he was in charge of IT and I was in charge of the color copier, and we grew that company and then went back to big agency. And then, so we kind of we had done it safely before. And it was safe because Doug paid us a salary.
Right.
But it was still like, basically we had to find a space and put up walls and figuring out about phone lines. Not that anyone does phone lines anymore. So we kind of practiced a little bit. And by the time we decided that we were going to start this, we knew we liked working together. It had been a long time. And I'd gone away and had 2 kids. Both the first time I was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my partner. Like that really sucked to me. And that's when I knew, like, I don't want to find another partner. And I, had the conversation with him. I'm like, listen, I'm going to be gone for a year. I totally get it if you find somebody else, but please don't. And so, it was just kind of, we've been lucky that way.
Mm-hmm. I remember being at the Soho House and seeing you guys, I think in the early days when you were just starting out.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder how Steph and Mark are doing, because it's such a big deal. I know that when I went from the agency to Pirate, life at Pirate, you have this sense that the people that are going to give you business. And of course, there's many stories of people who go out on their own and expect to drag business with them or use their existing contacts to get the ball rolling. And I always wondered, I wonder how these guys are doing. And I'm sure that's something that rings true for you too, And so tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, we had a non-compete when we had left the last agency before that. So we actually couldn't go after anybody or any clients for a significant period of time. So it was basically, if we're going to do this, we're kind of starting from scratch. And I think one of the things we had going for us is that, consistently over our careers as partners, the way we've dealt with clients had great success with clients is when we've had a really good relationship with them, a one-on-one relationship. And having good relationships with clients over the years, kind of, it follows you. And so we didn't have anybody to pull with us, but all of a sudden we had people saying, hey, here you're doing this. Here's a piece of business, or you should talk to this person. And still to date, I think 100% of our business is word of mouth, which, we're very, very lucky to have, because it essentially means people have already sort of bought into what we're doing. And they're probably going to be nice people if they're coming from people that we like. So, but, as creatives, you have a little bit of a buffer. We were able to freelance, or we thought we could still, nothing happens, we'll just get a job or we'll just freelance. So I think we were a little bit naive in that regard. And then you just you go for it.
What was the trajectory like? What was your first piece of business, and did it happen soon, or did you have to grind away for a little bit?
No, we got business right away. And it was, again, through old relationships. So a person that we had worked with at Ammirati, and actually I think at Doug, was going to a new company. So, and that was kind of a government food organization called Okta. Super attractive name. And the logo was just as attractive.
Right.
And so, but it was a cool idea. It was basically a culinary tourism alliance. So it was around food. I'm obsessed with food. So, that kind of started off. And then one of our favorite creatives at Lowe Roche, his friend had a law firm that needed somebody. They came in right away. So it was like that. People helping us out, and then just building things kind of one at a time. So clients that we had told their friends on other board of directors, and that's kind of how it grew. So yeah, we were all of a sudden really busy at the start, and that's why we didn't even really kind of acknowledge or pay attention to what we were doing. And we never launched. Like, we never told people. We didn't put the ad in strategy. We didn't do any of those things. We just kind of all of a sudden had work, and we needed to find people to help us do work. And
I mean, it's an amazing story. I know there's someone I know who has their own travel business, and once a year I see him and we have a conversation, and it's always the same. He's like, we don't do any outreach. The phone rings and we pick it up. And I think there's so many probably business owners and entrepreneurs out there who go, oh my God, I got to grind like crazy to get clients in. So it's amazing to hear a story about, somebody who started in a not an easy way, but certainly a path that doesn't seem to be in keeping with a lot of people's experience.
But I think part of it is your expectations too. And maybe like Mark and I are pretty conservative people, and that we didn't ever start this to say, okay, our goal is to get really, really huge and sell. And I think if that was one of our goals, there would have been a lot more pressure. But our goal was to build an agency where we could do really great work and make a lot of money and be really happy. And, whenever we were hiring people, or when we knew we needed to go to the next level and hire a managing director or a president, a lot of them would say, so, what's your growth plan? And our answer was to make a lot of money, to do really great work, and to be really happy. And so I think it's examining what that is. And maybe it's naive to, like, do we want to keep growing? For sure. And can you make more money? For sure. But it's maybe when you look at it through that lens, as opposed to we need to get to 10 million in sales by the next 6 months, or revenue, in the next 6 months, maybe that pressure gauge is a little bit different.
Let's talk about scaling business, because I know depending on the size of your agency, you need certain sizes of business. And how much of a challenge is that? You might get clients that potentially could be clients that are quite small, and others that you might look at and go, that's maybe too big. The staffing requirements are just something that you just don't want to do. How do you find that band of client that's sort of perfect for your size? Or do you just adjust accordingly?
I think the only scary ones, we've had a couple pitches where clients were so big we thought it might wreck us.
Right.
And so we would go back to the one in particular. We're like, when we have a conversation with you, it sounds great, but when we look at your procurement piece of paper, it's like you don't want us at all. And they're like, no, we really want you to pitch. And we have to have a lot of conversations with them. So with these guys in particular, it was, okay, what's it going to do to us? And are we still able to kind of have those key drivers of what we want to do? And is it still going to work? Or are we going to turn into like a big monster? So that definitely comes into play. A bigger part of it is if we like them and chemistry, and if they're jerks, we have a no asshole policy, both on the, like, it's actually in our contracts with both clients.
Those words.
No asshole. I think it says no sociopaths, no assholes, no cliques.
What if you don't know you're an asshole or a sociopath?
Well, we like for our staff, it's actually in our contracts that you've got like your 3-month probation, you could be fired for being a jerk. So it's probably not like, I don't know if it can stand legally, but
Do you get 3 write-ups as a jerk or how does that work? I mean, actually, I'll ask you that question. I mean, you go from being an employee and even at a senior level, you're still employees.
Yeah.
And then you have your own company and now you're hiring and you're firing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk a little bit about that because that's
so fun.
That's such a big deal, right? Like, I think you can be a highly creative person and have great ideas and be incredibly successful, but then moving into a managerial position means you need people skills and feelings and and all that stuff. You've already alluded that Mark's not great with the words. Do you fill that void a little bit?
He is the best firer I've ever met in my life. Like I'm panicked. I'm like, who's going to pay their rent? And he just basically is like, it's the right thing. Yeah. Here it is. I remember when I was at Lowe Roche and I was having a conversation with Denise Rossetto and she was having a conversation with her brother, and her brother said basically, when you're managing or when you're in a management position, you're basically just managing chaos. And I remember when she told me that, I thought, oh, it's not just us. Like it is because you're just dealing with trouble or issues all the time. And staffing is a big part of that. And it really isn't worth having the most talented person if they're jerks and if they roll their eyes when you ask them to go back and do something again, or if they're lazier than everybody else. And, that one person really changes the culture. I mean, it's not a new thought. It's people see that all the time. But I think we found that it really changes the output, not just the culture, but, are your ideas even great? And we find when we're hiring young people, for sure you have to have the book, but we want to go for those hungry people. Same with directors. We always go with the directors that are like dying for the job because we think they're going to bring something new to it because they're going to bust their asses, and they should probably be rewarded for that. So, and sometimes they have the talent and sometimes they don't, but it seems to be easier to teach the talent than to teach the attitude. Yeah. Like you have an attitude, go back, learn some more, then come back to us when you've got it sorted out.
So much of getting to a senior level as a creative team means I guess your responsibilities are such that you're moving away from the constant creative process because you have to split your time in managing people and stuff like that. I think for some creatives, I remember talking to Randy Diplock. Actually, we were talking about him a little bit earlier. I seem to remember him even saying, I don't want to get to a level where I'm too far away from the work because he liked the work so much.
Yeah.
And we all know that as you move up the management chain, more and more of your time is going to be sucked away from, because you're going to be performing that role. What is it like for you guys? I mean, I know that you guys are at the top of the creative chain in your place because it's a relatively flat organization. But do you sometimes wish that you had less of those responsibilities where you could just focus on the work, or do you get a lot of enjoyment from the managerial side?
I think both. So I think the business side of things has always I love the business side of things. So it's far too easy to go down that rabbit hole and not come back up and be attached to the work. But I think at the end of the day, and we're lucky because we're heavily involved in all the creative all the time just because of our size and how we're built. But there did come a time where Mark was like, you can't be doing all the finances anymore. It does not make sense. And it was great to do all of our billing for the first year or so because it really allowed us to learn what a buck was worth and how to bill things properly, because we kind of changed the way we wanted to bill. We wanted to go back to being paid for our ideas and not our time. All the account people, well, how many hours do you think that it's going to be? And I'm like, I don't know. And does it matter? Because if I come up with it in 5 minutes, it's still worth as much if it takes me 4 weeks to come up with it. Sure. So we're like, okay. And that's, when we started hiring people with big titles like presidents and stuff to basically take that on and take more of the new business side and proposals and more importantly, like the financial scoping over, because God knows they'd be better at it than we are. So yeah, definitely, because you still get dragged into those conversations. Clients want to talk to you about this, like, quote or whatever, and you're like, ugh.
Yeah. That can't be a fun conversation unless you're into it. Some people are.
Yeah. Mark's also very good at that. He just waits it out, and they back themselves out and they're like, okay, thanks, bye. So yeah.
So here's a subject we can talk about. I'm always a little bit, my experience getting into this business, I think maybe was a little bit different in terms of who the senior staff that I was working with. My first job at Y&R was Jane Pritchard was the creative director.
Yeah.
When I was in New York, my senior boss was a woman, Denise O'Blenis, great person. I had female partners. Patty Maxim worked with Patty, had an amazing time. And so when we get into the subject of women in this business, I always feel a little bit weird or sheepish even talking about it, because it should be a non-issue. But then I have to look back and go, well, I'm a guy. My experience is different. Janet Peck was on. She talked about her experience. It's kind
of sad that I probably worked with every female in the industry. That's how small it is.
Right. That's right. And even this, everybody, Josh will go like, are you going to have some women on the show? And it's like, I've asked some of them had turned me down, and I want to have more. And we should talk about it, I guess. So I'm just gonna throw it out there and say, well, like, what was your experience and what?
Why do I think it's like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had like a different experience based on the agencies. I recall Ammirati and TBWA were very split, which was pretty novel. And I think it was a very conscientious hiring policy to do so, to make sure that there was lots of women in there. But besides that, like, it's a lot of guys. Elspeth Lynn was a big kind of person early in my life, and Judy's always been in and around that kind of thing. But I didn't really start thinking about the female thing until we started hiring and thinking, okay, we really need to make sure that we have a lot of women in the agency and to get that diversity of ideas. And it becomes difficult because when you're hiring creatives, you just really want the best team. And so to basically put another lens on it where we want the best team, but we want at least half of them to be women, becomes something you have to kind of stick to. And, I'm part of a few of these groups of women who've started companies, or there's this cool thing that I was invited to called Wonder Woman, and it's women all over the world, and you get together and talk about stuff, and super intimidating. Like, I had dinner with a like microphysicist person who came up with like, the air and space or something crazy like that. And I was like, I do ads. Yeah. I'm awesome.
I do fish stick ads.
This is so good. I sell tea bags incorrectly. So, but we started talking about what happens to all the women. And so when you look at schools, when you look at going to OCA or OCAD or Mohawk, I would want to say that most of the students in the advertising program are women. I feel like it's more skewed. And then when you look at who's actually working, all of those women are gone. And I'm really curious to find out why. And I don't know if it's that they just go, screw that. Like, there's way too much going on in this business, and it's too hard, or it's too mean, or it's too cutthroat, or I don't know why it happens. It's like they just go into thin air. And people often say it's because they have kids, but I don't buy that, because all of the women that I know that are in the business have had kids and come back. To me, it's something coming up between school and the first job that we're not fostering them, or they disappear.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a sort of it's not entirely accurate to suggest that there's an assertiveness that goes on. I talk about inviting people onto this podcast and stuff, and I'm never quite worried when I'm talking to creative people. And the reason why I'm never quite worried is because you're going to be in front of a bunch of people and you're going to have to sell your work.
Yeah.
And that alone in our industry is enough that makes you go, well, they have to be at least assertive enough to stand up in front of a room full of people and defend their work and sell it and that kind of thing. So, I don't know. And that being said, you go through your career and you run into some pretty alpha dudes who can be pretty intimidating. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if that's the reason either. It's sort of interesting to hear you say that, there's some great representation going on, but then when you get into, I think it is changing. Like, I think when I think about the very successful women in this business and the topic of ageism has come up in these conversations too. But, but I look at Judy John and I go, like, I remember working in the mailroom at Chiat Day, and she was a force back then at that agency. And look what she's done. Yeah. I mean, she's just a powerhouse.
This was my first memory of Judy John. I was in my second year of school, and I was so panicked because of all those art directors that I grew up with who told me, first of all, you're never going to get into OCA and you're never going to get a job. It's like the worst thing. So I literally was like, and so when I finished my second year, I was like, I have to start getting a job so I can, have a good resume. And I begged my way into, I think it was called Jeffrey B. Roche and Associates. And Jeffrey was awesome. And he was like, your job is to build your portfolio. And I, also tormented everybody there. But I remember I was sitting and everybody, by this point, I had been there and everyone was petrified of Jeffrey and, obviously respected him, but scared of him. And my first memory was right outside of my cubicle, Jeffrey saying, get into the boardroom. And, when he said that, you were like in trouble. And Judy was like, no, I'm not going. And I was like, oh. And he said, get into the boardroom. And she's like, I'm not going into the boardroom. And I literally was like, Judy is scarier than Jeffrey. Like, this is awesome. And that was my first memory of Judy. And she just kind of, and she's one of the most awesome people out there.
Yeah, amazing. And you've had your family. What was that transition like? I mean, you did mention that your relationship with Mark and you're going to be away and you wanted to maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
But what do you think about that in terms of, this is true of any business. I make this comment to a bunch of people where I think about my parents and when they retired and the difference in their experience.
Yeah.
My parents, they had different passions, but those passions were always around. And when they finally retired, I found that they had a really easier job of retiring because there was something other than work that really kept them busy. But I know that there's an opposite story too, where people are really tied into their work, and when they retire, they sit around. Maybe for the first year they're okay, and then all of a sudden they're like, I don't know what to do with myself. It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
And I've looked at the differences between men and women, and I've always thought that women because women will press time out on their careers to have a family. I always feel like they have that's a very positive thing for them because they switch gears and then they get back into it and they can ride these transitions mentally better than guys can because a guy might be just laser focused and go for 45 years. And then when it's time out, it's like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, I think so because I remember Denise and I used to work out together like 6 days a week and we'd be on the treadmill and the conversation was often about, are we going to have kids? And it was all, are we going to have kids because we really loved what we did and our careers were doing half decently well and we thought, oh my God, we're going to stop, we're going to have a kid and then it's done, like we're screwed.
Right.
And then you do it and you hear about all these women who are bored and they need to come back to work. And I was like, I don't know how people are bored. There were so many things to do and so many kind of opportunities that you're like, oh, that's an interesting business. That's an interesting business. That's interesting. And I think for me, it kind of opened up my eyes in terms of there's all these other really neat things going on out there. And I do want to go back and work, but it was a little bit, it kind of stopped that hamster wheel of the panic of this normal trajectory and kind of turned it into something else. And then with my second kid, I just kind of kept working, and because my brain liked it, but just a tiny little bit to keep my foot in, because I was involved in some projects that I thought were cool. Yeah. I think it's a good thing. It opens your brain a little bit.
Let's talk a little bit about your background in terms of the entrepreneurial thing. So I know you spent some time in Boston.
Yes.
What of the extracurricular education-based things were you doing that has helped you thus far in your career?
That was the best.
It was.
It was like mind blowing, because I was sent down. It was a management course for Omnicom, and it was all like presidents and CEOs and CFOs. And I was like, when I was asked to go down, I thought, like, I haven't been to university. I've been to art school, and I am a creative person. Like, what if I am dumb? And what if I sound dumb? And what if I have unpopular views? Like, I'm always trying to, like, I'll go into meetings like, I'm not going to talk this time. I'm just going to zip it. And then it's impossible. And I thought, what if I say things that are unfavorable that reflect the agency? And I was like, are you sure you want to send me? Because I might say something that makes us look dumb. And they're like, yeah, go for it. And so I went down, and it just blew my mind. It was tons of work, but we were working on real business case studies. It was the first time I had kind of tackled that stuff outside of, a normal advertising assignment. And it was with Harvard profs, which I'd never experienced. And I was like, they're funny and they're smart and they kick your ass. And there was no hiding. I was like, I'm just going to sit there and, not say anything. Impossible. Like, you had to participate. And it was, is that my phone? I'm so sorry. I thought I had it on silent. Okay. And I thought, I'm just learning a zillion things at once, talking about how, the Schuldeis Clinic, should they expand with multiple clinics, or should they expand their offerings? Like, fantastic assignments and projects to work through. And so I came back to the agency with like a fat binder that I had put together, like a total geek of all things that I thought our agency or agencies in general could do to pivot. Because I thought that I could already see that the agency landscape was like heading for an iceberg. And I thought, there are ways that we can pivot and go back to being relevant and go back to being kind of honored by our clients for the talent that actually was housed in all of these places. And so I was like, I had my binder and I was so excited, and, in typical agency fashion, they didn't care. It was just like ticking a box, like, oh, I'm super cool sending a creative down to like this business school. And fortunately, Mark listened to me talk about my binder for a day. And I think that's really when we started questioning things, but, in terms of leadership and how agencies talked about doing things differently, and they really didn't care at all. And anyway, I am so thankful that I was sent on that course, because I became a business junkie, like hook, line, and sinker.
Let's talk a little bit about the business itself, because the industry is constantly in flux and there are trends that are happening. The one trend that seems to be in vogue right now is the in-house agency. A lot of the big banks and so on have created their own, and I see personnel that have been plucked from the ad world and then put into these places. That's one aspect, but what would you say about the industry in general? You said it was heading towards an iceberg at some point. Has it gotten better? Is it getting better? How has it morphed and changed in a way that's positive? Or you say that you're a critic, so what's wrong?
I think the majority I'm going to say that. I think there's still a large part of the ad world that's heading for an iceberg. And I equally feel like the clients are heading for icebergs. And I think it's because until people kind of change the way we look at things and talk to consumers, they're just going to keep missing the mark, and I think keep wasting their dollars. I think maybe a blessing and a curse of having our own business and then kind of becoming partners in a whole bunch of other businesses. We're really, really busy. So we actually don't look outwards in terms of other agencies a huge amount of the time, because we feel like there's a ton of opportunity for those to do it kind of differently and to find those clients that are like-minded into doing things differently. I'm a firm believer that if you're buying somebody's ideas, they should be following through on the ideas as opposed to getting other people to produce them. I think that the craft is where the magic lies. And we have clients all the time that come in and say, I really just need your ideas. I'm like, you're going to take our ideas, but it's not going to work.
Right.
So you should let us do your ideas, like to the end.
You had alluded to this earlier. I can remember being at Chiat Day working on Moosehead and getting I think it was a holiday card. And it said, at the top of the card, it said something like, dear vendor.
Yeah.
And I use that example because, sometimes within agency life, relationships are such that, you might be a team that's working on a piece of business, but the relationship exists at a more senior level, or that trust is established at a more senior level. You're in there. But I talk about how earnest most teams really want to see clients be successful. And yet there's a bit of this distrust. And I can't blame clients because our business is a business that likes to talk about itself a lot. Mm-hmm. And we have these things called award shows. And it's a lot about flexing creatively. And yet clients will go, well, did it move the needle in terms of the business? So it's hard.
And oftentimes the creatives are like, what do you mean? We weren't told to move the needle in terms of business. We were told to do this. Yeah.
Incongruent targets, I guess, or, if you win lots of awards, you'll be successful and you can move around. And then you have clients on the other end of it kind of going, well, if the only reason is for your own personal gain, then what about my business? I'm deeply connected to it. My success means that it has to do something.
Yeah.
So it's a business that shoots itself in the foot a lot.
Yeah.
Right? I can remember actually being at agency sometimes too, when you see big personnel changes at the top level, and their mandate will be, well, the work's got to get much better. I can remember this at Gray in New York. The work's got to get much better.
Same speech everywhere.
Yeah, and it's like you'd have your village meeting or whatever, and a new guy would come in and go, come on, guys, we really got to do much better. And I was the first one to kind of go, so I'm going to go to ConAgra on the Butterball account, and they've been buying this work for decades or whatever, and I'm going to say, well, that's not good anymore. That was crap.
You have to buy something else.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's like it's a hell of a position to put someone in.
Yeah.
So when you talk about doing things differently and maybe getting too big too, that's where I seem to think that's where things can go wrong. Mm-hmm. Is that when you're small, you can still stay connected. So how do you guys stay really deeply connected to your clients, or is it a size thing? Or is it a size plus philosophy thing?
I think it's a size plus philosophy thing. I think in terms of the size, it means that we or the team running the business have to have a direct relationship with the clients. And right now that's really us. And we need to be able to sit down and have a conversation over sandwich and say, what's going on with your business? And they have to want to talk to us about what's going on with their business. So we can't be a vendor. We have to be allowed into and under kind of the sheets to figure out what's going on. And only then are we able to say, you know what, guys, you think you want to do this, but you really don't. You really want to do this, or we should really be doing this. And this is where it gets exciting. And if the clients haven't bought into that, it's pretty hard to move the needle. I mean, we do have clients that are like, really, really nervous. We've been burned before. Let's just start with one ad. And then we're like, fine, let's start with one. And then if it works, we're going to talk to you about how to grow, which again comes back to kind of that trust factor and the relationship. So I think that's definitely like kind of the foundation. But the other side of it is we have a bunch of clients now where we're part owners or we're part of profit sharing, and that feels very different. And it takes a lot to get there. There's a lot of paperwork and there's a lot of conversations, and we have to totally buy into what they're doing. And they have to trust us enough, because we're going to be bossy at that point if we're involved in it. But it does change. It changes our conversations with all of our clients, because now I know about pick and pack and manufacturing and trucking issues. And so it allows us to have conversations with clients on an honest level, really about their business and what's going on. And we can understand that, okay, when there's a gas shortage, there's a trucking shortage, which means they can't get the product delivered to these clients, which means the cost goes up, which means they're all angry. So our job is to make them less angry at us. Right. So I think that's where that kind of relationship and client thing changes. So for me, it's twofold.
Yeah.
It's always personal. It always has to come down to, I think, the clients letting you in or you convincing them to let you in. There's a lot of clients that feel burned. We've got a new client right now that feels that. And so it's kind of baby steps, and just always reminding them that if we're going to do this, you're going to have to start trusting us. So we'll just do a little bit. And if you feel good, then we're going to keep going. But if we feel like you're treating us like a vendor, it's done. And if you feel like we're ripping you off, then it's done.
One Christmas card that says, "Dear vendor," away from ruining a relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
I ask every guest that's on the show about their key pieces of advice for someone who might want to do what you're doing, mm-hmm. or wants to get into the business or wants to emulate you in some way. What would your key pieces of advice be for them if they wanted to do something that you've done?
Getting into the business or throughout their careers?
I would say this idea of going from a creative team to owning their own business, because I think there's a lot of senior teams who maybe think about that because they have close relationship with clients, and they think, well, maybe could we do something like this?
Yeah. I think that we're taught as creative people that you can get as far as being like the CCO, but you still have a president and a CEO on top of you. And to me, that's bonkers. And we're taught that we're creative thinkers and we're not smart business people. And I don't think you can, well, actually, I think you can. You can probably be creative leaders and suck at business. But I think if you examine yourself, there's no reason why you can't run a company as a creative person. You can't put on the president hat as well. And I think that people should never put themselves in just a single lane. You know, your brains only expand as things are put onto your lap. You know, I know a lot about nutraceuticals now because we are part of that company. I wouldn't know anything about that. I wasn't an expert until I became an expert. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to give ourselves more credit that we can get out of our lane and we can actually run it. You don't need to necessarily have all of those kind of the business person and the financial person to start. Does it help? For sure. But you can completely do it on your own.
What's the perception versus reality? I think a lot of people think about being business owners and they think about it. They think about the financial gain. Maybe they gloss over the responsibility part, but I think there is this there's something sexy about it. Mm-hmm. What's the biggest thing that you've learned, or did you have a misconception that was straightened out right quick when you were out on your own?
Yeah, you have to love running a business. Mm-hmm. You have to love like invoicing, and you have to think about when you're talking to a client, how is that going to financially reimburse the agency, and how am I going to keep my staff on payroll, and what does payroll cost? It's a lot. Those CPP things, they cost a lot of money. I think you have to like that side of things. Otherwise, just freelance. Right. You can make lots of money freelancing. You're still master of your own domain. You're still in control of the projects and who you're working for, but you don't have to deal with the business side of things. If you like dealing with business and hiring and dealing with firing people, don't do it. So much time has passed since we've talked to one another. Mm-hmm. Do you have to keep harping on that?
I was just going to say, I'm trying to find a segue into talking about horses because I remember that was a big part of your life when you were at Chiat Day, and I think I took a peek at your Instagram, and I was like, "Yep, still with the horses."
Still with the horses.
So, so is that an outlet for you? Clearly, it's been a passion for you for a long time. Clearly, it hasn't gone anywhere in terms of being absent from your life.
Yeah.
But what do you get out of that? Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's never gone away. It's the money pit of all money pits.
I was going to say, that's an expensive passion.
It is.
Right?
My dad used to say, just dig a hole in the backyard, put all your money in it and cover it up and walk away. And that's pretty much the horse business. I think it has unintentionally blossomed. So I'm heavily involved. I ride lots of times a week, but now we started and run a barn, which was completely unintentional. But there was a group of us that we had been riding together for years and years and years at a place that wasn't even great, but it had an amazing culture. And when that place sold, we were like, we have to stick together. These are kind of the people that keep me sane. And lo and behold, we now run a not-for-profit equestrian club. And, I find kind of running the barn and competing and just going there definitely keeps me sane. It keeps me busy. I do tons of my thinking when I'm out there. And I'm told by multiple people I'm much nicer when I ride than when I don't ride.
Have you gotten Mark onto a horse, though? That's a big question.
No, I don't even know if he's come out to the barn once, I think. But, he stood there and hung out for a bit. Actually, I think he's been there a couple times because I remember doing some conference calls out there in the field.
I want to wrap up this. And at some point, we're going to have to mention that there's 4 cans on the table. This is not a product placement that's going on. The room. Or this is cider that you guys make for clients, right?
Yeah. The vendor card from Moosehead? We didn't want to do the vendor card to our clients at Christmas. And so we also like making a lot of stuff. So we started doing Valentine's gifts for our clients and the people that we really like to work with, because also without those partnerships, I don't think we would be where we are. So we work with so many good people. So we started making stuff, I think 6 years ago. We started off with coffee, and then we started doing beer, and I don't drink coffee or beer. So I was like, Mark, can we do something that I can enjoy? And so this is our second year doing cider, and we bring them to people we like.
That's awesome.
So, and it's actually really, really good. So, and it's done by Petitcombe, and they're amazing.
Let's wrap up with this one last question.
Yeah.
I always ask people what's on the horizon now for you, and what are you looking forward to? What's in your future?
Just a little question.
Yeah, it's sort of, yeah. I want to ask you about retirement in the equestrian world.
No,
I'll just say
can't afford it.
Yeah, let's talk about
I'm going to be mucking stalls for the rest of my life. I think there's a few things that are keeping me excited. I think growing the business through other businesses kind of keeps us pretty excited, and it stretches our brains and it keeps our skills sharp. So looking at not just the growth of the agency, but the growth of the company and what does that look like, I think is an interesting thing that allows us to kind of question everything that's going on. I think any assignment where the stakes are really high is very motivating. It's great to be scared, and both in terms of coming up with ideas that maybe you don't know actually how to produce because they don't exist yet, like the tangible results. So it's outside of that typical, the typical options that you normally put your ideas into. So that's really exciting. And then I also really, some of my most exciting jobs are ones where they've never been done before or they're crazy challenging. Like one of my favorite ones is a client came to us, an existing client, one of the original ones that we have had since the beginning. And he's like, I have this client and I think you can help. And we're like, okay, sure. And he's like, but it's never been done before and it might not be legal. And we're like,
good opening.
Totally, we're in. And we're like, wait, what do you mean it might not be legal? Like, could we go to jail? And he's like, possibly. And he was a lawyer, a law firm. And I was like, well, will you represent us? And he's like, sure. I'm like, fine, we're totally in. And it was one of those projects, and it's a long story, so I won't bore you with that. But it essentially, at the end of the day, it meant these two communities becoming bankrupt or not. And we needed to convince people to choose the moral avenue over a 6-figure check. And if we failed, the cities went bankrupt. And it was one of those ones, and we had 4 months to do it. And it was one of those ones where we're not just selling tea bags. This is where I could talk to the physicist and be like, yeah, we did something too. Right. And it felt important, and I'm really proud of that, doing projects like that. Because,
I'm going to assume it worked out.
It did work out. It's still going because it's
right.
a long thing. But yeah, our job of it totally worked out. And yeah, otherwise I'd be like, don't talk about it.
That's right. Currently in the witness protection program.
Yeah, totally.
Try to keep a low profile.
Not in jail, though. Our media partner had to go on the stand. This is like, fun fact that lawyer confidentiality thing actually does work. So all the emails that we had, because it was dealing with legal advice, we didn't have to go to court. Our poor media guy did. He still works with us, which is good. But it was a cool experience. I also learned that the best person selling your work is a litigator. We were in front of these huge boards of directors, and the clients would say, why do you think we should do this? And how much money, can we do this any cheaper? And the lawyers would say, hang on a second. It is in our best legal advice that you hire Mackie Biernacki and that you spend as much money as you need to in order to do this properly. And I was literally like, great.
I got to bring this down every pitch.
Yeah, you're hired. Yeah, it was the best.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks so much for coming on and sharing these stories, because you were so nervous. You were like, I don't know, I'll talk, and you probably won't use any of it. It's all garbage.
Ramble and
it's like, come on, be real.
I know, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable.
Well, we're at the end now. You can have a cider.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming on. This episode has been brought to you by the National Advertising Challenge, North America's only brief-based challenge that sends winners to Cannes, France.